Hey Jason here from Simply Swider. If your Kenmore washer is completely dead, no lights, no action, nothing, don't panic. In this video, I'll show you exactly how to diagnose and fix it. Most of these problems are simpler than you think, and you can save yourself serious money. Important safety note, always disconnect power before working on any electrical components. Before we get started, if you run into any questions, jump into our Facebook group. Links in the description. We've got thousands of people helping each other fix their appliances, and I pop in there daily to help out. So the most common cause, and I'm talking about 45% of the cases I see, is something going wrong with the electrical supply before it even gets to the washer's brain. I had this customer last month call me in a panic, swearing her washer died overnight. Turned out the GFCI outlet in her laundry room had simply tripped. Here's what happens. Vibration from the washer can loosen wall connections over time, or the power cord itself develops internal breaks. Those terminal connections at the back of the machine, they can arc and burn if they get loose. I've seen some pretty nasty looking terminal blocks over the years. Here's your 5-minute diagnostic sequence. First, grab a lamp or device you know works and plug it into the same outlet your washer uses. If the lamp doesn't work, you found the problem. Either a tripped circuit breaker or a GFCI outlet that needs resetting. Check your electrical panel and look for any GFCI reset buttons in the laundry area. Don't ask me how many service calls I've made where the fix was just pressing the reset button on a GFCI outlet. Now, if the outlet's good, unplug your washer and take a look at that power cord where it connects to the machine. You're looking for any blackened or burnt terminals, frayed wires, or that telltale smell of electrical burning. If you've got a multimeter, you can test the cord for continuity. It should beep all the way through when it's unplugged. This is definitely DIY territory if you're comfortable with basic electrical work. New power cord is going to run you about 20 to 80 bucks, way cheaper than calling someone like me. But if your wall outlet itself is scorched or dead, that's electrician time. Coming in at about 40% of dead washer cases is a bad main control board. That's the electronic brain of your washer. Now, here's where most people mess up. They see the display is dark and assume they need to replace the user interface board. Wrong move. The main control board is what powers that display. I remember this guy who'd already bought a new display board before calling me. Turned out his main control board had a blown fuse on it, which is super common on these LG built Kenmore models. $10 part, but he was ready to spend $200 on the wrong component. Here's what kills these boards. Power surges are the big one, but I've also seen age-related failures where the electrolytic capacitors just give up. Those little cylindrical components start bulging at the top or leaking dead, give away the board's toast. And don't get me started on pest damage. Roaches love the warm, dark spaces where these boards live, and their droppings can actually bridge electrical contacts and short things out. Here's how to diagnose the control board. Look for a small LED light on the board. It should glow when the washer is plugged in. No LED means the board is likely dead. Also check for visual clues, burn marks, a burnt electronic smell, or bulging capacitors with rounded tops instead of flat ones. If you see any of these signs, the control board needs replacement. Now, replacing the whole board is going to run you anywhere from $150 to $350, still way cheaper than a new washer. If you're handy with electronics, sometimes you can just replace the blown capacitors or fuse, but that's getting into advanced DIY territory. This is where you got to decide if you're comfortable handling circuit boards and following wiring diagrams. About 13% of the time when a washer appears dead, it's actually the lid switch assembly causing the problem. Here's the thing. If this safety mechanism thinks the lid is open, some models won't even light up the display, making it look like a complete power failure. I had this lady call me last week, swore her washer just died mid-cycle, got there and immediately noticed there was no click sound when she closed the lid. The little plastic striker had snapped off. Happens all the time when people slam the lid repeatedly over the years. These switches fail a couple ways. Mechanical breakage of the plastic parts, magnetic failure on the newer models, or the internal electrical contacts just wear out. On the magnetic types, the magnet in the lid can actually lose its strength over time. Weird, but it happens. Your diagnostic here is pretty straightforward. Listen for that click when you close the lid. No click usually means mechanical failure. If you've got a multimeter, you can test for continuity across the switch terminals with the lid closed. Should beep if it's working. Some models will flash specific error codes like F5 or show lid on the display if they're getting enough power to communicate. Replacement is usually pretty DIY friendly if you can access the console or lift the top panel. You're looking at about 30 to 80 bucks for the part. Just don't try to bypass this permanently. I've seen people hurt when a washer starts spinning with the lid open. Use the bypass only for testing, then fix it properly. This one's less common, but really frustrating when it happens. The noise filter fails. This little component sits right where the power cord enters the machine, and its job is to smooth out electrical interference. When it goes bad, power can't reach the control board at all. I remember this repair where I spent an hour diagnosing what looked like a bad control board. Power was getting to the machine, but nothing downstream was working. Turned out the noise filter had shorted internally. Power was going in, but nothing was coming out the other side. These usually fail from electrical
Hold the filter
surges or
with one
just
hand
internal
and
component
connect the two
failure.
wire
The
harness
tricky
plugs,
part is they're often
white to white
overlooked
and
because
pink to
most
red.
people go straight to testing the expensive control board. Here's your test. Measure AC voltage going into the filter from the wall side, then measure what's coming out on the load side going to the board. If you've got 120 V in but 0 volts out, there's your problem. The filter itself is only going to run you about 30 to 60 bucks, and replacement is pretty straightforward if you can handle basic electrical connections. Just make sure you've actually got a voltage drop across the filter before you replace it. Don't want to throw parts at a problem that's somewhere else. Thermal fuses are the safety device that cuts power if things get too hot, and when they blow, your washer goes completely dead. This isn't super common on washers, more of a dryer thing, but it happens especially if people overload their machines regularly. Had a customer who was cramming massive comforters into a washer that wasn't designed for it. Motor kept overheating, and eventually that thermal fuse said enough and cut the power permanently. These fuses don't reset like a breaker. Once they're blown, they're done. Diagnostic is simple. Continuity test with your multimeter. Good fuse should beep. Blown fuse shows infinite resistance. They're usually located on the motor or sometimes on the control panel, depending on your model. Here's the thing though, if you replace the fuse and it blows again immediately, you've got a bigger problem. That usually means there's a short circuit somewhere that's causing the overheating. That's when you call someone like me because chasing electrical shorts can get complicated fast. But if it was just a one-time overload situation, a $10 to $20 fuse replacement might be all you need. If you've got one of those older mechanical washers with the round timer dial, this could be your culprit. The internal electrical contacts in these timers can carbonize and fail over the years. All that arcing as the contacts open and close eventually takes its toll. These failures usually show up as buzzing sounds with no action, or the knob spins freely without actually engaging anything. I've got some of these older direct drive Kenmores that are absolute tanks, except for the timer. That's usually the weak point. Your diagnostic here is checking for 120 V going into the timer, but no voltage coming out to the various circuits. You might also be able to see the burnt contacts if you can get the timer apart, but that's getting pretty involved. Timer replacement runs about $100 to $200, and it's moderately DIY friendly if you're methodical about transferring the wire connections one by one. The good news is these older machines are usually worth fixing. They'll run forever with proper maintenance. Just make sure you take pictures of the wiring before you disconnect anything. The control board is the most expensive fix, $150 to $350 for the part alone, plus 2 hours of your time. Before buying, consider your washer's age. If it's over 7 years old and the repair costs more than half a new washer's price, replacement might be smarter. These boards can sometimes be repaired with blown capacitors or fuses, but that requires soldering skills. I've seen boards where just replacing a couple of electrolytic capacitors for maybe 10 bucks total brings them back to life. But that requires some soldering skills and the ability to identify which components are bad. For most folks, board replacement is the way to go. The installation isn't too bad if you're methodical about it. Take pictures of all the wire connections before you disconnect anything and transfer them one by one to the new board. Just make sure you're working with the power disconnected and handle the board carefully. Static electricity can damage these things. Lid switches run about 30 to 80 bucks depending on your model, and they're usually pretty straightforward to replace. Most are located under the top panel or in the console area. These aren't typically repairable. The plastic components break or the magnetic elements fail, and you just replace the whole assembly. The installation is usually just a couple of screws and plugging in a wire connector. One important thing on the newer BMW models, After you replace the lid switch or actuator, you often need to run a recalibration sequence. Don't skip this step or your new part might act like it's failed when it's actually working fine. Noise filters are in that $30 to $60 range and they're moderately DIY friendly. The challenge is usually access. They're often buried behind other components. These definitely aren't repairable. When they fail internally, replacement is your only option. Just make sure you've confirmed the filter is actually bad with a voltage test before you replace it. I've seen people replace perfectly good filters when the problem was elsewhere. Installation is usually just disconnecting a few wire terminals and swapping the old one for the new one. Just make sure you get the wires back on the right terminals. Thermal fuses are the cheapest fix on the list, usually 10 to 20 bucks. They're also usually pretty easy to access and replace. These are definitely not repairable. They're designed to be sacrificial safety devices. Once they blow, replacement is the only option. The key thing is figuring out why the fuse blew in the first place. If it was just a one-time overload, you're probably good. But if there's an underlying problem causing overheating, that new fuse is going to blow too. Installation is usually just disconnecting two wire terminals and swapping the fuse. Some are held in place with a bracket or clip, but it's pretty straightforward. All right, if you're dealing with faulty parts, let's talk about what you're looking at cost-wise and whether these repairs make financial sense. Here's the reality. Repair economics on washers depend heavily on the age and type of machine you've got. For these older direct drive models, I usually tell people to repair indefinitely. They're built like tanks and parts are relatively cheap. But these newer VMW style washers, they're kind of designed to be disposable with a 3-5 year lifespan. If you're looking at more than $300 in parts and labor, replacement often makes more sense. The other thing to think about is the DIY versus service threshold. Some of these fixes are totally DIY friendly, others require some electrical know how, and a few definitely need professional help. Now, before we wrap up, you can see right there on your screen the most common Kenmore models that run into these power problems. You might spot your own machine in there. The patterns are pretty clear. The LG built front loaders tend to have control board fuse issues. The newer VMW models have lid lock and actuator problems. And those older direct drive models usually fail at the lid switch or timer. The good news is once you understand these failure patterns, you can apply this diagnostic thinking to pretty much any washer brand. Power supply problems, control board failures, and safety switch issues show up across all manufacturers, just with different error codes and slightly different locations. Here's your action plan for a dead Kenmore washer. Start with the 5-minute checks, test the outlet with a lamp, inspect the power cord for damage, and listen for the lid click. If those pass, look for LED lights on the control board and check for burning smells. Work from simple to complex, and remember, don't buy expensive parts until you've ruled out the cheap fixes first. The key thing is don't assume the expensive parts are bad until you've ruled out the cheap and easy stuff. I can't tell you how many times I've seen people buy $300 control boards when the problem was a $20 power cord or a tripped outlet. If you guys know someone who's having appliance troubles, please send them the link to this video or a link to my channel where I have tons of other videos showing how to fix pretty common issues with appliances, sometimes for free or as little cost as possible. It sure beats having a repairman come out and spending several hundred for them to fix it when it could be something so simple. If this helped you get your washer working again, hit that like button and drop a comment below. Let me know which fix worked for you. Really helps other people with the same problem. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. We'll get this out to more folks who need to save some time and money. Thanks for watching, and I hope you guys have a great day.